A 5-year dispute between the city of Rockford and Miss Carly's takes an unexpected turn Wednesday evening as the organization was not represented by an attorney, forcing a continuance at the appeal hearing.
WIFR's Anthony Ferretti was at tonight's meeting and talks with one resident who says she's fed up with Miss Carly's and the city's legal team, who say they are frustrated with the short notice on this lack of attorney present.
This started in 2019 when Miss Carly's got a special use permit to operate the organization out of their home. These permits came with guidelines that had to be followed, but city leaders say Miss Carly's hasn't made an effort to make building changes to comply with these rules.
The applicant may now come forward.
Miss Carly's board member Christine Hemlock represented Carly Rice at Wednesday night's meeting on why their special use permits should not be revoked. But one problem, Rice and her attorney didn't show up.
And we don't hear until 4 p.m. today from their attorney that he's not going to appear or he's unavailable, whatever else may be. But it was 4 o'clock today. That is simply unacceptable.
The Illinois statute says corporations can't be represented by a board member or corporate officer. Hemlock falls in that category.
In the best interest of due process, I think, is to allow a continuance so that Miss Carly's Inc. can be
On behalf of Miss Carly's Inc., I would like to request a continuance.
The ZBA granted the continuance on one condition. Rice must appear at the November 19th meeting with an attorney, and no further continuances will be granted. Back in 2022, the city told WIFR Miss Carly's hasn't complied with several building regulations, an ongoing battle in its 5th year.
I am both not at all surprised that she didn't show up, that she just completely blew it off.
Kelly Kulak lives in Rockton and is involved with some Rockford nonprofits. She shares frustration with board members that this issue has gone on long enough.
It is costing taxpayers money at this point.
I did ask Hemlock for an interview after the meeting. She declined. I also couldn't leave a voicemail for the attorney and haven't heard back from Ms. Carly herself.
Thank you, Anthony. And regardless if an attorney is present at the November meeting, the board will then make a recommendation to Rockford City Council on if Miss Carly's original special use permit should be revoked.